What's up, guys? I'm Chad Barnes, and welcome to the channel. Here, it's all about real car talk, from simple fixes to smart driving tips and keeping your ride in top shape. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button and make sure you watch all the way through. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Let's get to it.
Apart from this, there is one more situation, which I will bring out separately. The car does not pull away, but there is a difference in forces when turning right and left. In addition to purely mechanical reasons, which we'll talk about below, there are some electronic reasons, which we won't deal with today. A classic example is Mazda 6 GH, with its ever-dying steering angle sensor. In addition, it happens that the steering rack with GUR dies, which also sometimes manifests itself in a similar way. The steering wheel turns easier in one direction than in the other. This is not so common, and the owners of 6s and so know what repair kit to order and how to change it. Therefore, we will deal with more common causes of drifting to the side. And we'll start with the simplest, with straight line driving. Not straight. So, the car is pulling to the side when driving straight and level. What's the first thing to look for? First, let's turn on Captain Hindsight mode. Look at the tires. If they are all inflated evenly and the pressure is correct, it is specified in the car documentation, we run cap with a wet rag and start thinking. And again, first check what is simpler. Touch the discs of the wheels. If one of the discs is warmer or even hotter than the others, we have to check the brake caliper first. Most often the wheels get hot because of the calipers jamming. And if the caliper is jammed and does not release the pads, the wheel brakes and pulls the car behind it. In particularly neglected cases, if you drive for a long time with a jammed caliper, you can drive to the death of the hub bearing. Because of its constant overheating, the grease will simply leak out of it, and the bearing will die a painful and stupid death. In this case, the car will pull even harder. Of course, hub bearings can die even if the calipers are in good condition. Therefore, if everything is all right with the brakes, the bearings will have to be checked as well. However, before you pull the car to the side, the bearing will howl long and very loudly, so its malfunction can be noticed much earlier. But if for some reason this has not happened, you can jack up the wheel and rock it from side to side. If there is play, it means that the bearing is no longer there. To bring it to this state is difficult, but possible. More often than the bearing, incorrectly set camber and convergence angles are to blame for straight-line drifting. It is difficult to check them yourself, although skillful people do it quite accurately with the help of twine, ruler, laser pointer, and other improvised means, so it is better to do it in a car service. By and large, it should be checked at least once every 2 years, but we all understand that the ideal is unattainable, and we are more often interested in the corners only after a set of new tires is eaten because of their curvature. It is better not to get to such a point. There's another reason the car will drag sideways. That's if someone's repaired something wrong. More specifically, they've replaced a part on one side, but not the other. A shock absorber, a spring, a stabilizer bar, a tie rod lug or something like that. You don't do that. Everything in pairs has to be replaced in pairs. Therefore, if the car began to pull sideways after such repairs, you should not be surprised. A very common cause is backlashes in the steering mechanism. Steering rod ends, tie rods and the rack itself will also have to be checked. Fortunately, or unfortunately, all this usually gives itself a decent knock, which will help to realize that it would be time to go to the elevator. Finally, malfunctions in the chassis. They can be many. From a broken ball bearing to a broken stabilizer bar, its worn bushing or torn silent block. But with such breakdowns the car is more actively driving sideways during acceleration and braking, so let's move on to them. I go forward, you go left. Let's start with the brakes. Of course, the first thing to check in case of drifting is the brakes. It's obvious, so I won't dwell on it. The easiest thing to do is to go to a brake bench and make sure that the difference in braking forces is not too great. More noticeable drifting will be if there is a problem with the brakes on the front axle. It is possible that the malfunction is due to incorrect ABS operation. In short, the test bench will show you everything. The second cause is just suspension problems, the most likely of which are faulty springs, shock absorbers, and silent blocks. In other words, everything that starts working when the car presses its nose to the ground during braking and tries to lift the rear end. Search in this case is easiest to start with the usual diagnostics of the chassis. That is to drive the car on a hoist and methodically press everything that has connections, especially rubber ones. By the way, Do not forget about subframes. If they for some reason fall off the car, for example, rotted to hell, the car on the road and especially when braking and accelerating will behave inadequately. It is better to check shock absorbers on a vibration test. Here, as with brakes, it is necessary to make sure that their efficiency on the right and left is more or less the same. If you are too lazy to go somewhere, you can evaluate shock absorbers, and at the same time springs, in the old-fashioned way, with your eyes and hands. If even with the naked eye you can see that the distance between the wheel and the fender arch on one side is greater and on the other. Sideless, you do not need to go to the stand. You can immediately make an appointment for repair. Most likely, the spring coil has burst. And for complete peace of mind, you can rock the car up and down in the same old way. If the rocking from different sides will be noticeably different, you can not go to the stand, but to replace the shock absorbers. However, for such diagnostics you need at least minimal experience, so it is more reliable to trust stands. If the car tries to run away to the side of the road or to the oncoming road during acceleration, first of all it is necessary to check all those elements of the chassis as in the previous paragraphs. But to this you should also add checking of some elements of transmission. You can start with the ball joints, although they usually show up in a different way but still, if the dust covers have long been torn and the joints have already suffered from dirt, they can jam in any situation, not only crunch and turns. Second in line is the differential. It is not so difficult to check it quickly. It is necessary to hang up the front axle, if it is a front-wheel drive car, and spin one wheel. The second wheel should slowly spin in the opposite direction. For control, you can lock one wheel, ask a friend to hold it, and try to spin the other wheel. It spins. Good. Of course, this method does not allow you to assess the condition of the differential completely. After all, you should at least look at the oil for chips in it, and even better, the gears themselves. All this, especially the latter, is noticeably more difficult, but quite a neglected case will allow to detect. In rare cases, the suspension bearing of the driveshaft, if there is one, may be to blame. Symptoms of its failure are different. First it begins to hum, then there is vibration, but if you cannot find anything at all, you can look at its condition. Another not quite obvious reason is the condition of the rear arm silent blocks. First of all, hydrophiled, also known as floating. Part of the described manifests itself very rarely, and in the first place during acceleration the cause of drifting will be more obvious and related to the killed silent blocks and backlashes in the steering mechanism. In a nutshell, as a final reminder, sometimes pulling to the side under hard acceleration is perfectly normal for some front-wheel drive cars. If the car has drives of different lengths and there are no systems to compensate for this difference, you should not be frightened by the attempt to drive sideways when you press hard on the gas. And you should also remember that all rubber products lose their properties over time. Therefore, old silent blocks on run cars can have different stiffness on the right and left sides. Even if they have not cracked yet, they can still give the behavior of the car on the road some peculiarities. Naturally, unpleasant ones. In conclusion, if your car is pulling to one side, it's essential to address the issue promptly. Whether it's due to uneven tire pressure, misalignment, or worn-out suspension components, ignoring the problem can lead to further complications and safety risks. Regular maintenance and inspections can help ensure your vehicle remains in optimal condition. Always consult a professional if you notice any unusual behavior while driving. Stay safe on the road, and remember that a well-maintained car is key to a smooth and enjoyable driving experience. Thank you for watching.